a lot of storytelling is getting people to look inside. Like you mentioned that emotion. Like for example, if I'm Nike, for example, I'm not telling the story of how amazing Nike is. I'm telling the story of how you're sat on the couch and you could take that first step. So a lot of storytelling is creating the emotion for the reader to buy into their own journey and be like, well, I'm here right now and I could be here if only. And that if only should be the company that we work with or the person or the salesperson.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Morgan Ratcliffe. Morgan is the co-founder of Ratcliffe Brothers, which is an agency, I think you're an agency, you'll have to double check, around story-driven marketing. That's something I'm interested to find out about. So, Morgan, welcome.
Thank you for having me, mate. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you on. Well, you better tell us, really. I mean, you're the story expert. Tell us a story about the Ratcliffe Brothers. I think that's pretty interesting. And then what story-driven marketing actually is.
Yeah, of course. No, my favorite topic to talk about. So I'm glad you brought it up. My brother and I, from a very small town not too far from Manchester, grew up a very working class background. We both played football full time. I only went to school a couple of days a week myself. Did day release, played for Accrington Stanley. I then went and got bought by Mansfield Town. There
Stags.
I was.
The Stags, the mighty Stags.
Playing for the
Sorry
Stags,
to interrupt.
16 to. Don't worry, I'm just perfect. I was playing for the Stags as a scholar, 16 to 18. And then I wasn't too enticed by their 1 year contract. They offered 1 year professional contracts, and they weren't particularly enticing. Anyway, I ended up leveraging the football experience to go over to the USA. Did 6 years there, did a bachelor's degree in economics, master's degree in finance, blah, blah, blah. So my brother did a very similar path. He played for Stockport and in Manchester, then ended up coming to the US. Through that time, I ended up graduating, going into banking. My brother went into marketing. We were miserable working at those types of jobs, as you can imagine. I started a newsletter inside of trading, ended up doing quite well. My brother was doing really well in marketing. So we decided to combine the two skill sets. So we had a very, very basic initial offer, which was, okay, we know we love writing stories about people and we like putting them online and we know how to get traction with those types of stories. But kind of how do you build a business out and how do you do all those types of things? So we took on, one initial client, they made loads of money. So we were like, okay, there's a concept here. I quit my job in banking. My brother quit his job in marketing, and we kind of went all in. We're very not particularly risk averse people. I was working in investment banking in Chicago. As you can imagine, it wasn't they're all great jobs. You just work a lot of hours. But we both quit. We went all in, and we decided to basically start what we're doing now in a very very basic form.
Lovely. There's a story. There's a story for us. Quite a backstory, which, I mean, you could spin that out for hours. There's so much interesting stuff in there. So, I mean, you started off with kind of the newsletter and stuff about people, but you've developed this into this kind of this concept, genre, I guess, of story-driven marketing. So what is that then exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that you'll notice when you see brands and people and all this type of stuff, they really struggle to get eyes on what they do. Be that anything, that can be, just content in general. That can be a podcast people are putting out. That can be just anything in general. And we pretty much honed in on the reason for our clients was that they just weren't telling the story. We often fall on an amazing founder who has a great story. They have this great origin story. They've done all this stuff and they just don't tell it. And then we also have these great companies that position in great ways and help people, and they don't tell that story. People with great services, and all they do is say, buy from us because we have a really great X, we have a really great Y, we're really great at Z. So we just thought, well, there's clearly a massive need here for people to be able to tell their stories and really connect with their audience. And it all starts with this concept that we have of story-driven marketing, where we tell founder, company, and service stories. And it's a way of saying, why should I buy for you? What do you do for me? So what companies do very poorly from what we can see from the outset is they talk about themselves a lot, but they don't do a really great job of telling people why you should buy from them. And what do you do for me? What outcome do I get? And that all comes from the story-driven marketing concept. So for example, as a founder, we tell the founder story. why should you trust that founder? What experience have they got? How do I connect with that person? How do I follow along with that person? Why would I want to be involved with their company? Why would I want to even connect with that person? Tell me some great stories about your expertise. Tell me some great stories about how you've done X, Y, and Z in your life and what you've learned from them. Get some eyes on the founder so that people are looking at the founder very close to the personal branding concept, apart from it's a very story-driven approach. So we can tell stories from their life, how they founded the company. The company story is very similar, apart from it's more of a positioning piece. So companies do a very poor job of, they say, we are great at X. Or like, for example, for myself, I would say, we are a marketing company that specializes in B2B. And you can see that spiel with a lot of companies. But for example, for us, we just have stand out through story. And that's because people aren't sat at home wanting to work with a B2B marketing company that focuses on X, Y, and Z. They're sat at home wanting to stand out. And when they fall on us, they don't know what we do. They just know, okay, they solve the problem that we have. And that's very much the company story. It's talking how the company addresses the problem that their clients or potential clients have. And then the service story on the back end is just, instead of saying, we have great X, Y, and Z, we're great at X, Y, and Z, our team's amazing at this, we position as a solution. So we talk about that service, that's case studies of amazing clients, what times someone's had a problem, you've implemented that solution and the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. So it was something that we not found, but it was something that we found was working amazing for our clients. And then eventually we sat down and we put a name to it and tried to build out a concept. And since then, of course, it's been growing from strength to strength.
And so I like frameworks. There are frameworks for each of those stories. There are ways in which you tell it. Just like we have the hero's journey and all those kind of ways in which you can tell a story. Have you developed a way, to pull the information out of people, but then to kind of put it back together in a way that flows and it's going to interest people?
Yeah, interestingly enough, a lot of people have asked me this question recently, where it's, do you use traditional storytelling frameworks, hero's journey, 3-part structure, 5-act structure, all those types of things? And the answer is no. What we do is we take things that work well on specific platforms. So we focus on 2 platforms because we're specifically B2B. We focus on LinkedIn and email. It's all inbound email stuff that can be drip campaigns and all that type of stuff on the back end once you sign up for things. And we use frameworks that have worked well on those platforms. So we've built out frameworks that have got millions of views on LinkedIn. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. We built out those frameworks, took them, applied them to different founders. Turns out what works. And we do that across email very similarly. What converts. So we've told stories obviously now for, I don't know, we've, nearly 10 countries, 50 plus founders now, plus companies, etc. And what works. So we built those frameworks out very similar to the one pack you mentioned earlier. Prior to us jumping on, and that was something that we wanted to outline, those frameworks that we use. So in terms of frameworks, and that's what we do. And interesting that you'd mentioned how we get stories out of people, because that's probably the biggest sticking point in our business in terms of founders are busy. How did we get to this point where we can get stories out of people? And we do it in quite a nuanced way, which is interesting. But we figured it out. It took a while, but we got around to it.
Do we have to pay you to find out the way? Or can you tell me?
No, you can. Yeah, it's absolutely fine. So,
because I was being a little bit facetious in that question, because you're currently running a campaign which is incredibly generous, where you packaged all of this goodness for £1. So, are the listeners going to have to give you £1 to get this, or can you just share it with us now?
I'll give you anything you want for £1 from our business. It's interesting that we're willing to give everything away, but we enjoy doing it. So. Yeah, I mean, the way we get information out of our founders was always a sticking point for us. It was super difficult to start. We started with like a 1-hour call where people had to jump on and dive, et cetera, et cetera. And now we pretty much distilled it down to 2 ways that we get information from founders and clients. Number one is we work on a prompts and voice notes basis. So, like, for example, the founder wakes up on a Monday morning, they've got 5 prompts from myself, or one of the team members now at this point. And then they can send voice notes back. So, like, for example, Morgs, question 1, I actually love that. Yes, we got started X, Y, and Z. They go into a small story on a voice note. I have that voice note stored. So we can then continue working on a voice note back and forth basis. They can do that whilst they're running. They can do it on the train. They get out the shower. They have an idea. Morg's got an idea for a story. It's a very voice note based practice. And then against that, people who aren't in favor of the voice notes, we go back and forth on a weekly call. So, for example, it can be 30 minutes. I come with the exact same prompts, ask the exact same questions, apart from it's just more face-to-face based. So it works on those two fronts through Slack or WhatsApp or whatever is best for the client at the time.
Because you know the info that you need to plug into that framework. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, so I suppose when was it Joseph Campbell, was it? Who was kind of doing the hero's journey thing and working out those
Yeah,
bits. Yeah, LinkedIn and emails weren't really a thing. It worked.
yeah, they
Well,
were.
no, I mean that's I suppose that leads into the next question, doesn't it? I mean, hero's journey works brilliantly well for films and books and all that sort of stuff. That's what it's all about. Um, you are, well, it's to give people entertainment. You're trying to do something else. You're trying to convert, and you say, well, we want to do the stuff that converts, which is why you have the new thing. But why stories though? I mean, let's kind of go back to the basics on that. Why do they work so well?
Oh, I mean, this is a super simple one. So we go back and forth with this. People often say to us, like, "Oh, that exact same question." Well, stories have been around much longer than any other form of communication that we have. So the way that we've retained information through thousands of years, of course, everybody already knows this. You pass down stories from generation to generation, and then you get all the way to TikTok, which is about 7 years old. So people suddenly think, oh well, short form video and just informing people and just doing the bits and bats are going to get you through it in the marketing world. When actually stories permeate throughout all of us. Like one of the reasons that everybody loves Nike so much, their clothing is not the best quality workout gear. What they do is they tell stories really, really well. The Just Do It campaign's amazing. You sat on your couch and you can go to a place where you take that first step in your fitness journey. And I think brands like that have done a really great job. Apple's another one who've done a really great job, and those brands tell great stories. And like I said earlier, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think a lot of people try and overcomplicate things and say, okay, we're going to build out a landing page to get clicks, and then we're going to reconvert off these clicks, and then we're going to retarget off this. And when actually, if you just build really, really solid stories around a business, you can generate organic interest around that business, and then you can launch things vicariously through that. So it's yeah, it's worked for us so far.
Well, yeah, well, I guess it's because, as human beings, we're interested in other humans, aren't we? We're nosy, let's face it. Is this person a friend? Are they a foe? We're going to fight with
Yeah.
them, or we're going to run away from them, whatever. So you're going to get that natural element. But stories are also pretty persuasive, aren't they, in their very nature? I mean, what's going on there? Why is that?
It depends how you position. So some people do stories terribly wrong because they make it self-centric. So it's like, for example, I could tell you a story about my life, but the first thing about storytelling is realizing that nobody cares about your shit. Like nobody cares what you're writing. Nobody wants to read your stuff. Nobody cares about your story personally. No one cares about your business, and that's the first step. And people forget that, and they say, "Okay, let me just tell this story about my life." I'm Morgan. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Number one, why should I read that, and what value am I going to get? So what I think in terms of the persuasion and the reason that people buy into them is because of the value they can get out of it. It's all about the value to the reader. They pay with their time to read my stuff, so I make sure that my stuff pays them more than they paid in their time, and we do that for clients, etc., etc. So it's a value focused approach to storytelling as opposed to let's just tell a random story that people don't want to listen to.
Yeah, and in a well-crafted story, it's going to sort of tweak on some emotions as well, isn't it? We're going to tug on the
Yeah.
heartstrings or kind of appealing to that side rather than the pure logic. Because
Yeah,
I've
no,
heard people put
100%.
stories together and it's just like, well, that's just a a blast of logic. That's just numbers and like figure facts. I don't really want the facts. I want the sort of the other
Yes.
juicy bit.
It's often getting people to buy into themselves, interestingly enough. I think a lot of storytelling is it's getting people to look inside, like you mentioned that emotion. Like for example, if I'm Nike, for example, I'm not telling the story of how amazing Nike is. I'm telling the story of how you're sat on the couch and you could take that first step. So a lot of storytelling is creating the emotion for the reader to buy into their own journey and be like, well, I'm here right now and I could be here if only. And that if only should be the company that we work with or the person or the salesperson, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, I think you said something really interesting there. Just need to underline that. Well, it's all very interesting, but no, I'm here and I could be over here.
Yeah, it's an A to B. It's very
Yeah,
transformational. It's super important.
yeah. And so somebody has done that, and look at this better place that they're in, and almost, well, not necessarily the process, but that is possible. Yeah,
It's selling the outcome. Yeah, it's
yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah. So the outcome. Okay. So, such good stuff. So, I mean, you talked about sort of founders and companies and services.
Yeah.
A lot of people listening to this are going to be salespeople. They're going to be individuals. They're going to go, well, yeah, that's for the company to do, and I've got to sort of just pass this on to customers. Is this something that every salesperson can do at an individual level, do you
Oh,
think?
100%, 100%. So we often work with sales teams to try and help them build these sort of systems out specifically for themselves. So often as a salesperson, you kind of have to look at yourself as an individual entity. So you are a specific person and you're selling a specific service, and there's a specific reason why the person should buy from you. So I think a lot of salespeople go for a numbers approach, which is like, I can outwork the other salesperson here, here, and here. I'm just going to go pure outreach. I'm doing 1,000 cold emails a day, and it's a numbers game. I couldn't. Obviously, I won't shun that. Obviously, a lot of people make a lot of money from numbers games. That being said, for salespeople to be able to build a brand around themselves, I am the person that you should go to for X. I am the person you should go to for Y. Well, why? What is it about your story that has given you the expertise for me to want to buy off you? Why am I connected to you in a certain way? Do I feel empathy for you? Do I want to jump on your journey? Do I want to buy from the company that you're working for? Can you translate the value of what you're trying to sell to your audience? And it's the same concept that we've talked about in terms of motivating people to purchase, buy into their own journey. If I'm a salesperson selling plumbing, I don't want to go around and just start peddling plumbing and banging on doors. You need new plumbing. It's the issue is that the person is what they're dealing with at home is not that they need new plumbing. It's that their toilet's overflowing, and you want to be the person that can take the person from your toilet's overflowing to your relaxing at home with a wine with your family. And I think a lot of salespeople miss that in their approach. They miss that, okay, I can take you from A to B, and I'm the reason, I am the person to do it because, and you can do that through permeating your own stories. So it's super, super important for salespeople.
Yeah, I mean, what I see quite a lot is that they default to the company, and well, not even story, the company facts. It's like, oh yeah, we've been around 170 years, and we've got all these product lines, we've done this sort of stuff, and we've got all these people that we sold to, whatever. And maybe that actually works. You go, actually, that's pretty impressive. But I'm not really sure I want to work with you though. I want to work with that account manager. Why? Because they look as though they've got something a bit more about them. And I
Yeah,
think they're
the
going to
word
be
we.
leverage all that good stuff for me. Whereas
Yeah,
you're not really giving me anything that gives me confidence in you being the safe pair of hands to work with. So
yeah, for sure.
they
The
definitely miss
word
a trick
we,
on that.
the word we is the real issue there. So if you're a salesperson and you find yourself saying, we are the expert at X, we are the best people to go to for Y, what everybody should always think is like, well, the person just doesn't care. Like maybe you can tell me a story about how you took a client with that same problem, and you can tell me a story how you took a client that's facing the exact same problem, you implemented a solution, and then you show me an outcome. Now that's an effective way to sell me something. Okay, Mr. Ratcliffe, you're dealing with X problem right now. Let me tell you about a story of this time that we actually had someone doing the exact same thing, same place, and here where they are right now. And now we're pushing an outcome. And then, like you mentioned, that personal story is super, super important. It falls right in line with the founder story that we do. It's just for the individual on an individual level. Why should I buy from you? Do I have a connection from you? And that can be written content, and that can also be stories that you have banked to be able to tell on podcasts such as this, or on a sales call, or just face to face. So for salespeople, it's almost essential.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like having a little sort of, I don't know, probably a bad example. I don't like the concept of like fighting, but you're like an ammo belt with all these little stories that you can just pull the thing out and go, there we go, bang, that story works. I can just chuck that one in there, boom, and I can tell it so many times. Yeah, I
And
know
it's
how to tell it. I
non-invasive.
know how to tell it, how it lands properly because it's been constructed in a certain way. Rather than I sort of talk about this, and sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. It's a very deliberate sequence to how to get that information across.
100%. It's just it
Yeah.
doesn't feel very threatening if you can come in with a really story that someone can connect with. I think relatability is a real issue with salespeople. I think they come in suit and tie. They call you. They've got that, hey, great to see you. How was your day? They've got that very unrelatable feel to them. I think being able to tell a story about how you were in a similar situation, for example, if you're selling a specific product, I completely understand how you feel. And if you can tell them how you were in a similar situation, how you got out of that situation, suddenly you're relatable. Suddenly you're on the same level as them. Next thing you know, you're telling them stories about how you can take them from A to B and that you can make their life a little bit better. They trust you, they believe in you, they see you as a very similar person to yourself, and then you make the sale. And it just seems to be a much better way. I mean, from our experience at least, we've tried many different types of getting people to convert and all those types of things, and it's always been the best for us. So
Yeah. So, okay, let's imagine we've got one side. I'm such a visual thinker. I'm easy to
Love it.
tell stories too. As long as you start creating the picture, I'm there, I'm gone, you know.
I love
So
it.
got this salesperson, they kind of got this little ammo belt on this pack of
Yeah,
stories. We want to equip them, to go out and do this. It's the same stories then. It's the story about themselves, CEO of their own business. Actually, I'm quite comfortable
yeah,
with that for a salesperson thing. Story about the company, story about, the product or service they sell.
yeah.
Let's just have a little look, if we can, at that story about themselves. Because I think you said that's the one that people struggle with most.
Perfect. Yeah.
Well,
No,
firstly, why do they struggle with that one most, would you say?
because they don't see it from any value to it. So, like, for example, if I'm a salesperson, I'm not even thinking about myself within the sale. I'm thinking, why should this person buy what I'm selling? So they kind of cut themselves out of the equation when actually they're a
Okay.
huge, huge part of the equation.
Yeah.
When it comes to that personal story, it's not only why should I buy, but it's why should I buy from you?
Yeah.
What's your authority? For example, if I tried to sell you on solar panels, you should be asking yourself the question, what does this ginger boy know about solar panels? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Um, but on the other hand, if I had a story about how I'd gone to California, I'd worked there for 6 months, I'd sold X amount of solar panels, I'd gone through this whole period, I wanted to make England a better place. So I'd come to England and I was fighting for solar panels and rights on this side. Next thing you know, you're like, oh, this person is passionate. Also, they're an authority in the industry. They've worked with these big people, and you can take something from that, then move on with the conversation to why the solar panels X, Y, and Z. So, um, random example in solar panels, but it just translates to anything.
No, it's interesting. I work quite a lot with sort of engineers, manufacturers, and people who've gone into those types of business. It's because they have got a passion for it. Yeah, people selling trucks, for instance.
Yeah,
Many of them have sort of grown up. They're on the spanners. They're probably an apprentice. They've worked through that. They've become then sort of head of the service department. And then someone said, "Ah, you're really good with customers. Go out into sales." And like, oh, no. I mean, what a brilliant background to be bringing in and saying to customers, "I know this stuff."
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that
Without
you would
having to
want to
tell them.
wrap in. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
No, it's been interesting, and honestly, one thing that I've noticed is that we work with high ticket B2B service providers. So most of our clients charge a load of money for what they do, and I think that it's okay to try and make small sales and small ticket sales with a very traditional approach. But you want to sell someone a 50,000, 100,000 one time service, maybe more, etc. I think you have to build something similar to what we do, at least a story in general, into that sale. How does that person know what life's going to be like after working with you? Why would they spend 50,000 with you specifically? And also, one thing I'll note for salespeople that have actually more of a difficult time is not only do you have to know your story, like you have to know why they should buy from the company as well. So being able to even divert back to that founder story and say, you know what, I got my story specifically, and then actually the founder of this company has X, Y, and Z, and has this experience and built this company from X, Y, and Z. And now not only are they trusting you, they're actually trusting because you are also, the founder, you know who this person is. It feels like you've got a relationship directly with them, and they trust the company. And then as we go along, we build this trust and we build the trust and build the trust, and then eventually we can make that sale. So yeah, for salespeople, it's a little bit more difficult, but it requires some depth of knowledge, but it's very, very important for sure.
It's a little bit more difficult, but actually the phrase you've used there, which is "What's life like after I've bought from you?" I
Yeah,
mean, really, if a salesperson doesn't get that, they're going to be struggling, and more so in the way that sort of sales is taking its path, because we sell results.
yeah,
Salespeople sell results, and a result, kind of leads to the outcome. We could debate over whether they're the same thing or not, but it's like kind of like if you don't really know the result that you're selling, well, you're going to be really struggling explaining, but what that actually means for the person, what life is like for them.
yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
means
the
that
key.
they don't have to worry about something. They can sit with their feet up. The thing you've sold is doing the job for them. They can be as
Yeah,
lazy as you like. Oh, people don't want that. Some do. Some people might want more time back so they can continue to grow and make the business faster. And you've got to find that out and then work out what is that outcome, that life for them like that's relevant to them. That's
yeah,
selling,
and
isn't it?
it's yeah. But one thing that salespeople miss, like we see this all the time, is that they think they're selling the outcome or selling the result, but they're actually selling a metric. So, like for example, for myself, I could say, "I'll get you 10 leads a month. I'll book you 20 calls a month." no one sits at home thinking, I just wish I had 20 calls a month. They wish for their life to be easier, to have more freedom, or to have, and really dialing down to that individual level of, okay, what is this person's problem that they're sat at home on their own at night worried about? Is it stress? Is it time, like you mentioned? Is it any of those things? How can I convert my result metric? So that might be more money, that might be booking calls, for example. But how can I paint a picture of what life is like for the person on an individual level after working with us, as opposed to just add, 10,000 to your top line revenue? Well, there's 99,000 million companies that can do that. We're a marketing agency. Marketing agencies are a dime a dozen. If I started going around saying I'll add 100 grand to bottom line, I'm sure there's 1,000 companies that could do that in their own specific way. Being able to sell the outcome of how your life is actually going to be like after working with us. And like, for example, we give people that haven't been able to tell their story and they feel like they've built something with their life, we give them the opportunity to be able to tell that story publicly, and not only tell it in the right way. And that's a very different feeling to me saying, well, I'll book you 20 calls a month off a lead mag that's going to lead to downloads. So that's a small shift in perception that a lot of salespeople miss.
Yeah. Yeah. And even when they get that, often people will put their values on something like, it's like, I want to grow the business. I want to be a multimillionaire. I want to be doing all this stuff. And people they're talking to you might be going, I just want to not work on Fridays and Mondays.
Yeah.
What you're telling me sounds like more work. Not attractive at all. No tar.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just understanding what the right story to deliver is from your story belt or whatever this imaginary thing I've invented is.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So we've got why stories work. We've got those 3 types of story. Yeah, you've got a cool way to extract those. What else do I need to know about stories? You've got different frameworks. Sorry, I just want to, because we're not using Hero's Journey or some of the others. What else do I need to know about stories? What haven't I asked you? God, that's a lazy podcast question, isn't it? Tell me a story, Morgan. Come on, you're the expert, mate.
I think that one thing that people miss, and that I think would be genuinely useful to people listening at least, is that they don't permeate multiple stories throughout their entire messaging. So, for example, say I'm a salesperson, because I know that a lot of people listening to this are salespeople. I'm trying to sell different ways on different platforms through different mediums with different messaging, and there's not one story or multiple stories that permeate throughout all of them. A real bedrock. And companies, you see that all the time with companies where they've got one TikTok strategy, they've got one Instagram strategy, they've got one podcast strategy, and everything's kind of fragmented. Well, what I think is very important for companies to do, and salespeople in general, is to really hone in on what they want to sell, what their stories are. And it's okay, I have these stories set in stone, and now I can build all my content, all my outreach, everything off the back of it. It's, if I'm on a podcast, what are the interesting things that you already have as snippets of stories that are ready in your arsenal? If you're going to write content for outreach, what is that pain point that we've been talking about, that outcome that the people want when I'm doing that outreach? And, can I frame that in a story? My messaging, if I'm a salesperson and I'm on LinkedIn, what does my banner say about me? What does my about section say about me? Am I positioning in a way that is taking someone from A to B, or am I saying #1 rated salesperson in the UK or whatever? Well, nobody gives a shit. Like, tell me how you help me. And I think that having that one message that permeates throughout all social media or outreach or podcasts or X, Y, and Z, face to face, in person, once you've got that down, you're pretty much you're golden. And it's one thing we do for sales teams, for example, is that sometimes sales teams go out and they just say, sell a product. Well, I don't care. Well, the product does X, Y, and Z. Well, I don't care. I don't know enough about the company. I don't know enough about the founder. I don't know enough about myself. I don't know enough about how this helps people. And once you lock that down as a company, and also as a salesperson, you're just good to go. And you're like, okay, well, I have a built-in strategy for everything now. So I'd say that's probably the question to ask.
Oh, that's an excellent question. I will ask that question once we stop recording and insert it into the. No, I won't. I'll just leave it as it was. It's awesome. I could chat about stories for ages. I could sort of. Well, no, I don't need to hear them from you because you are using these regularly. I mean, talk about practice what you preach. Your LinkedIn, I love reading them because it's always
Appreciate that.
interesting because you're nailing this stuff. So is that the best place for people to contact you, LinkedIn, or is there another
Oh,
way that you'd
absolutely.
like to drop here while you're on?
Yeah, absolutely. No, no. LinkedIn's always the best place, and obviously website, etc., etc. But yeah, LinkedIn I'm the most accessible. I don't spend any time on any other platform, as you can imagine.
You spend quite a lot on LinkedIn by the looks. So
Disgusting amount.
well, it's part of the story, mate. It's part of the story. So yeah,
Uh,
we'll put a link to your website in the show notes. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn as well.
Love
Um,
it.
Thank you so much for coming along, spending a bit of time and talking us through story-driven marketing. Really
No
interesting.
problem at all. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me.
A pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the collaborative selling scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.